This is the Cameron Journal Podcast. It's a place where we talk about important things. It's a place where we bring a little slice of the news to you. And it's a place where we do important things, have important conversations. It's also things that I like to talk about. My name is Cameron Cowan, and this is the Cameron Journal Podcast. Today on the Cameron Journal Podcast, I am joined by the author of Threading the Needle, A Fashion Designer's Guide to Successfully Launching Your First Collection. Here's what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to murder his lovely name because that's just going to end badly. So I'm going to talk glowingly about his book, and then we're going to have him pronounce his name for me. So this is, when it comes to fashion design, long-time readers will know I used to be a fashion designer, founded Denver Fashion Week, all this sort of thing. There is a lot to know about this business and a lot to figure out if you're going to get into this business. So if you're thinking about being in this business, this is the book for you. And we're going to find out more about it and the lovely person behind it. So welcome to the Cameron Journal Podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Yes. So here's a copy of the book, Threading the Needle.
Very nice. Yes.
And my name is Kadeem Alphanso Fyffe.
Thank you. That is, I would have ran that into the ground. So rather than do that, we're just going to be polite.
No worries. I appreciate it.
Yes. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the book and what inspired you to write it?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, the book is titled Threading the Needle, A Fashion Designer's Guide to Successfully Launching Your First Collection. And I published it in May of this year, May 3rd of 2023. And initially, I just was going to write it as an ebook, but then as I was in the process, I decided that it would be best if I also made it available in print and then also as an audiobook. So the audiobook actually just came out yesterday. So it's August 9th today, but the book is available now in in all three of those versions on most platforms online. And the inspiration behind it, basically, so I come from a fashion design background. I've been in the New York fashion industry for about 10 years, and I've worked for brands like Michael Kors, Burberry, Gary Graham, and then I also, from there, I kind of moved into the startup space where I worked for startups like athletic startups like Wallaco, which stands for Way of Life Athletic Company, and several others. And from an experience that I had in 2017 with Wallaco led me to start consulting, doing design and production consulting for other brands and other entrepreneurs who were basically trying to take their creative vision from initial concept to market. And I wanted to sort of talk about that experience and sort of give a guide to other people who might be looking to start a brand or start an apparel collection, or even just launch a product that might be new or innovative, something new to the market. And so earlier this year, in March of 2023, I taught an online course also named Threading the Needle, but that was about taking your overall artistic vision from initial concept to market. And basically, I was, just doing talking about giving the sort of a detailed roadmap about how to do that. And in the process, I was compiling suggested readings for the course. And the slide that I used as a template just happened to have 3 slots for 3 different books. And then 2 of the books I had already read. And then one of them, I was like, you know what? The slot here, the empty slot here is the space for my book. And I had not started writing said book, but because I was putting together all of this content and sort of graphics and text and definitions and sort of like anecdotes from my personal experience with the design and production consulting, I realized I had material for a book. Because when you're creating PDFs or creating a bunch of stuff, creating a bunch of content rather for a class, I feel like you're already creating a book. And so I thought, well, why don't I just create this ebook as a supplement to the course, so that if someone who logs on online takes the course, listens to the 4 sessions that I taught, they might have further questions. And so I thought, kind of just like to elaborate on the to elaborate on the class. And then so that was March, I guess March 7th, I announced that I was going to start, I was going to um publish this book, and I hadn't really started. And so I then was like, it's going to come out sometime in the spring, like April or May. And so I really just buckled down and wrote the book. And again, I used a lot of the content that was already used in the course, and then I just kind of elaborated on that. So the book is really just again, a detailed roadmap about how anybody who's either in fashion or trying to get into the industry, a detailed roadmap for them to take their creative vision from initial concept to market.
No, no, that's tremendous. And what a journey, and in such a short period of time. That's quite
Yeah.
impressive. You're very industrious. I was wondering, one of the things I wanted to ask about is obviously fashion reality shows have become very popular in the last several
Yeah.
years. Amazon has a new one out, where they have the show and everything, but then designs from the designers are available on Amazon the same week the show airs on Prime, which I think is rather clever.
Right.
What do you think about that?
I'm sorry, actually, can you repeat the question? Can you repeat the question? Doesn't want to
No,
answer
no,
it.
not a problem. So yeah, so they have these fashion shows, and so Amazon has one where you can go buy the ready to wear look the same week as it airs on Amazon Prime. And I was just wondering, what do you think about that? I think it's rather
Well,
clever.
I think it's super clever, yeah, and I think it kind of like mimics a fast fashion model that's very prevalent right now, sort of like um either see it on the runway. If you can see it on the runway, you can like buy now, wear now. And I think it just like is part of an overall trend in fashion where people want things super quickly. And so, you're attending fashion week and you can see something come down on the runway or be shown on Amazon or be shown on a TV show. And you're like, I want that now. And where can I go click? And honestly, if something isn't available now, then something isn't available immediately, then you might not make the sale. So I think it's really cool. And Amazon, that makes total sense because they have everything that's kind of quick, quick and ready and available. And that makes sense that it goes along with Amazon Prime because I mean, when I shop on Amazon, I'm expecting my doorbell to ring in like 1 to 2 minutes. And by that, I mean 1 to 2
Yes.
days. But, like that's super quick thing.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
totally, yeah, that makes
No,
sense.
I also, the other thing I like about that show is that the designers each have to do one ready to wear look and one couture look, and it
Yeah.
shows the difference between what is goes on a runway, which I call haute couture R&D. That's the F1 of
Right.
cars,
Right.
and then ready to wear is the production model. And I think, people don't honestly understand that difference a lot, and I like that show because it shows the difference between the two. Um,
Right.
so that was a statement. Here's a question though. The fashion industry gets a lot of flack for some of the crazy shit that goes on in the R&D
Right.
department. Um, and then there's like, how is this relevant? Who would ever wear this? All this type of thing. What do you think about that difference between research and development, basically, and what actually ends up being sold? Do you think that criticism is valid?
Right. Well, I definitely think, I mean, the criticism, I guess, would be more valid from people who are in industry, just in general. But I think that they're getting at a thing about like saleability. So, like, we know from like working in design that the things that we sort of like conceptualize in our creative minds are like, oh, this would be fabulous. This would be great. But like, is it saleable? Is it functional? Is the fabric like, I don't know, sustainable? Is the production process ethical? Those kind of things are maybe not considerations we think about when we are first like starting to sketch or do that research. And I think that I think so. Yes, I think is a fair criticism in that what we do in our world sometimes doesn't translate out into the real world. But I think that uh, we're getting closer to designing from a more realistic and consumer focused way. And I think that I've always tried to be a designer that is like data driven. And it's like, okay, well, if this little black dress sold really well last fall, then okay, we might want to do something similar, but then, upgrade it or update it rather to what might sell better this year. And I think that sometimes designers, especially like highly creative, more like couture, more conceptual designers, an issue that they run into is that they're designing about what they think is pretty or what that they think would look fabulous. And sometimes it's just not functional and certainly not saleable. And so I've always tried to be a designer um, that focuses on what that end product is going to look like. Like I try to think of like, what is this going to look like on a rack or on a shelf or in a department store or a boutique before I start my design process, but all the while remaining true to like my aesthetic and my values.
Oh yes, and those of us who have or had shops definitely appreciate hanger appeal because there's a lot of stuff, particularly like women's wear tops. It does like those things where it's kind of like this is actually really great. It has no hanger appeal. Like it
Right.
doesn't. It looks like an amalgam of something. And there were so many times where we would go through and be like, okay, that has no hanger appeal. We have to put that on a mannequin. That also has no hanger appeal. We have to put that on a mannequin. Like this is merchandise. Like this is the merchandising decisions we're making. And it's kind of like this has no hanger appeal, but we've run out of mannequins and floor space. Ah, well, like so
Right. What do we do?
yeah, exactly. And now what are we gonna do? So I definitely appreciate all those considerations because it seems like for the longest time none of that stuff seemed to ever matter,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, that's so
So
yeah, it there I don't think that there was that consideration. There was a definite fashion used to kind of just be for fashion people, and it was just like, here, this is what we're going to make and then we're going to sell it, and if you don't buy it, whatever, we'll just like throw it into a landfill or something. But I think now people are especially with the move towards sustainability and like reducing waste, like brands, especially the bigger fast fashion brands, not necessarily fast fashion, but the bigger brands that have larger reach and larger distribution are more concerned about what is actually going to sell so that we reduce waste. But and also like making sure that um, we're not only designing for sample size. Like that used to be a thing too, like especially
yeah.
for dress designers who are like more high end. It was made for a specific type of person. But I think that the fashion industry has definitely expanded its like reach and its availability to everybody. And I think that that's how fashion should be. Like it should be more democratic, especially in the US market.
Oh no, I know I think that's kind of because people have gotten, people have always been a variety of shapes, but people have gotten, bigger, all this type of thing. Times have changed. And for the longest time, and this was certainly true like when I was in high school, because I've been fat forever. And so like when I was in high school, it's like there, I I have never bought a piece of clothing from a mall department store ever in my entire life because I haven't been mall size since the Clinton administration. So it was just pointless and kind of irrelevant. And I think there's been a lot of frustration with that. And it's not even just, perma fat people like myself. It's new moms that are kind of like, my body's not the same anymore. Where do I shop? And it's like, well, first of all, you're standing in a Forever 21. Leave that place immediately. But I mean, it's things like where it's like it's so hard to, understand those changes and for fashion to be relevant to people and all this type of thing. So I love this people-centric focus. It's
Yeah.
overdue, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That's 100% true. I think that it has been overdue for a while. And actually, sort of like on that topic, in like 20, let's see, I was kind of there. I started my career in like 2013, 2014, and I was there kind of around the time where the conversation around like body positivity and size inclusivity was actually becoming a real conversation and not just like, oh, I'm going to take the sample size and like size it up and then like sell it over there. It was having like real
Yeah.
discussions with consumers, having like actual plus size fit models coming in, working on like the language around how you talk about people's bodies, no matter what their size is, but then also how you talk about how the clothes fit and what fabrics might be best and things like that. And I was working at a women's athleisure company, and we had to do this whole present. I remember we had to do this whole presentation to the board, trying to explain to them why we needed to expand our product offering from instead of going from like extra small to 2XL, we would go, or sorry, extra small to XL, we needed to go from 1X to 3X, and we needed to hire a new fit model. And we needed to like put all of these real, thoughtful sort of procedures in place to get to that final product.
No,
And
absolutely.
to get and inevitably to get to the final consumer. So yeah, it was very interesting going through that because I had originally come from the very like, we're only designing for a size 0, but I think the fashion industry has definitely moved to a more authentic way of body positivity and size inclusivity, which I think is great because fashion should be for everybody. No, in my in my young mind, when I wanted to be a designer, I thought I want everyone to be able to wear my clothes. I didn't know how that was going to look, but that's something that I want. I wanted my stuff to be accessible in as many categories as possible.
No, owning a vintage shop. One of the reasons we were so successful and won best upscale shop the first year we were open is we offered in-house alterations.
Okay.
Um, and so I remember this, and I keep always tell the story because it's so funny. There was this Asian lady that loved this brown sack dress. I think it was a Vivienne Westwood. The
Right.
problem is it was a size 8. She was not. She was a
Oh
2.
dear.
And
Okay.
she actually paid for us to take the whole thing apart and take it in so that it
Wow.
could be assessed. And we painstakingly, because we wanted to, like, there was a design on the front. We didn't want to interfere with that. Like, basically had to rebuild this dress. And she, at great expense, paid us to do it. And I said, it takes all kinds, because we also had a lot of vintage suits, oftentimes not from a brand. They were from a local tailor, or a local store in Denver, like May DNF or whatever have you. And people were just smaller back in the 50s and 60s. People would bring us this stuff. Grandma has
Sure.
died, mom has died. People would bring us this stuff. And a lot of times, of course, it was so small, we couldn't sell it. We couldn't sell it. Then the little Asian ladies discovered us, and it didn't leave it couldn't leave the building fast enough. Like, they just took it all, because it was unique and it was guaranteed to be a one-off. They could go to a large wedding and be guaranteed no one would be wearing it because it was, one of one essentially by now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that whole conversation, and that's why I said it has to be, different things for different people, because there's such a diversity of people. Having something for a little something for everyone is a great
Yeah.
thing.
Absolutely. That's so true.
So, returning to your book, this has been a good discussion, though. Returning to your book, though,
Yeah.
what are some tips you'd have for new designers who are trying to break out into their own brand?
Yeah, so I'm absolutely, interested in answering that question. So I kind of like would just kind of go through the sort of like 7 sections that I've broken it out to. The first step really is like defining your brand identity, because like if you don't have that, then like what are you designing into? Like coming up with your brand mission and your brand ethos, and then that sort of creates the world that all of your designs and your marketing materials, everything can live in. And then having like a really clear understanding of your target market. So if your target market is like Gen Z city girl, then you know what she needs to wear. And then if it's like suburban moms in Ohio, then you know what she needs to wear. But I think that it also is related to brand, but understanding your target market is super critical, especially in those beginning phases. And then obviously when you dive into designing your collection, this is like my favorite part of the whole process, like design. And I think that often one thing that I like to point out is that often designers will just jump into sketching, and it's like you need to do a little bit more work before that. Like, where is your brand mood board? Where did you go fabric swatching? Have you shopped the market? Do you understand your target market? And do you understand who you want to be as a designer, as a person? Like, what are your personal values? And then who are you as a designer? And then from there, you can sort of dive into the sketching or dive into working on Illustrator or whatever sort of computer aided design program you're using. And then the next thing you want to, go into sourcing and producing your collection. That's when you go out and find fabrics and trims. That's when you go out and see what kind of notions you want to include. So that's like zippers, buttons, things of that nature. And then also maybe if you're doing something more mass market, you might have to reach out to like actual manufacturers if you're not just doing like samples for the runway, for instance. And that process is super super difficult, but luckily there are experts all around. So I would say one piece of advice here is always reach out to an expert if you're kind of like finding yourself stumped in the process about how you get from point A to point B. And I think that the sourcing and production part is an often a big roadblock for new designers, especially if they are coming from outside of the industry and want to launch something, like trying to find a manufacturer or something. But there are databases that kind of make it easier for you, and they're like sourcing agents that you can reach out to. But if again, always just try to find an expert to help you in that process. And then once your collection is kind of done, you want to do marketing and promotion, and then you want to have like a super fabulous launch event. So for most designers, this is like a runway show or like a design presentation where you might just have like models walking around the room in your clothes, or you just have it hanging on mannequins or hanging on hangers or on mannequins in a store. And I think like the launch event is often like just as important as the design process, or just as important as the pieces itself. But you want to make a splash with your launch event. And then, you want to, once everything's out in the world, you want to make sure that you're effectively managing your business. And this is a part that I kind of like to talk about to people who are more creative. Like, and I'm speaking from personal experience because I've run into this when I've launched other collections for myself and other people, that I'm like, I don't really have that much business savvy. Like, I get it, I get the basics, but there are other people who are better at business than I am, and I'm better at design than they are. But it's like find a partner that you can work with, that you trust, and that you sort of like feel like you can give them your baby, if you will, like give them the um give them your clothes, or give them your collection, or give them your brand, and be like, hey, I really want to, in 1 year I want to accomplish this, in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And that has been like a big learning lesson for me. I spent a lot of years like spinning my wheels thinking that I knew what I was doing as a business person, when really I just needed to focus on the creative. So I think knowing your strengths is a really good piece of advice as well, and just like staying the course and making sure that you have like very clear deadlines about when you want your collection to be done, and when you want your brand to launch, and where you want it to live. And then like lastly, always like design with a purpose in mind. And that goes back to what I said in the beginning about like your brand mission and statement, and like your brand ethos. Like, who do you want to be? Who do you want your brand to be? And where do you want it to live in the world? And what impact do you want to make on the world? And I think that if you, with anything, but with design, if you operate from that standpoint about what impact you want to make, then you'll always kind of do good, or you'll always succeed. And that I've always tried to use what impact I want to make in the world as my guiding light when I dive into designing work or releasing products into the world.
No, I think that's very good. I There's kind of another kind of weird aspect of this. And I'm so glad you mentioned it about the understanding the business portion, because almost everybody in all creative industries gets that part wrong. Like
Right.
they're like, I mean, and this is you see this in music mostly, because you have people, not so much anymore, but 5, 10 years ago, get paid a lot of money, and is the most money they've ever seen in their lives, but they don't
Yeah.
understand that the long money is
Yeah.
in, publishing, all this type of thing. They don't understand the business, and so they end up making a lot of other people wealthy. And they're saying, they're being like, so I only have $5 million, he has 50. What happened? Well, sir, you
Yeah.
sold your publishing, all your worldwide distribution, all this everything. You basically got paid to just do the thing, and that was it you know um
Contracts are important. Lawyers are
yes,
important. And I think
yes,
self advocacy is super important, and that's something I always say, especially for creatives. Like, creatives often do get like screwed. That's the nice way of saying what they get, but it's like,
yes.
I yeah, whenever I've been presented with a big contract, I'm like, we're going to go through this with a fine tooth comb. My attorney's going to go through it. And then we're going to come back with what might be most beneficial for me, but also like both parties. Like we both have to win in order to succeed in business. But I don't want to end up 5 and 10 years down the line being like, wow, I could have made so much more money had I just like read that one clause or like
No,
had
I mean
this
this.
expanded.
No, I mean this is literally the difference between like people don't understand. It's like, do you want to know? You want to understand why Mariah Carey is worth $500 million? She
Exactly.
owns all her publishing, so anytime her songs appear anywhere, she is getting paid. She makes $110,000 every Christmas for happen to having the most popular modern Christmas song ever because she owns the publishing. So when you
Exactly.
hear it in Target, she's getting paid. When you hear it on TV, she's also getting paid. But if you don't understand the business of music, you don't understand that that's where you make the real money. And a lot
Yeah,
of people will sell that away to any old body,
they will
sort of
because they
thing.
want to be famous. Yeah, it's true, especially in the
Yeah.
beginning when you're sort of bright-eyed and naive. Yeah, you're bringing up such a good point.
Yes, and in fashion is the so. I mean, even in I'm an author. I primarily publish books, and that's the first thing I tell people. As I said, you have to understand how the book business works because otherwise you will fall for every scam. You will sell away rights that you shouldn't. Especially now, film and television adaptations are a big business because Hollywood ran out of ideas 20 years ago, so they've been borrowing ours ever since. And it's like if you don't understand all those little nuances, and like go read a book, go take a class, go take a webinar. Um, Sort of thing. If you don't understand all those tiny nuances, you're going to fall flat on your face. And fashion is just the same way. Like you have to understand production, you have to understand, fabric and mills and all that sort of thing. You have to understand retail. You have to understand where to go to get the orders at the stores, the websites, all this type of thing. It's like if you don't know what magic is, go Google, and buy a ticket
Yeah.
to Vegas, or LA, sort of thing. It's like you have to like that's those are the venues, and that was and that's I think just such a and you're right, lawyers are important, all that sort of thing is important, especially if you're working with a very large retailer.
Oh, absolutely.
um
Because they're often sort of in charge. And I think young designers often run into that
and
problem
they'll
where
take you straight, no chaser, dry, no lube.
you're, scandals, literally.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
will, which is no fun for anybody.
Nope.
No, it's true. Yeah, and I talk about that in the book too. I give resources like resource lists to the various trade shows, the various places that you can show for Fashion Week. I give like resources. I guide people to like buyer directories, to retail store directories, and it's like these are some things that are often like very gate kept in our industry. And that's kind of one thing that I wanted to point out is that I wrote the book as if it were a resource that I wished I had when I first went into the industry. Like, where is somebody guiding me to X, Y, and Z? Like, it took me years to figure out what Text World was and what like apparel sourcing is and what magic was. Like, I knew early on in my career, but the point is, I wouldn't have known if someone didn't tell me. And so,
Yes.
a lot of designers, especially who are not in those sort of bigger cities, who are not in like a New York or in LA, they are operating and designing in a vacuum. And then it's like, well, where does your collection go after it's on a piece of paper? Like sketches are great. And if that's what you want to do, then okay. But if it does not translate into a garment that can be sold and seen on a runway or seen on television, or most importantly, sold in stores, then what are you doing? So I kind of wanted to give a roadmap and give out those resources about factories, mills, suppliers, trade
No,
shows.
I so wish that I had had something like that when and indeed one of the reasons why I kind of left that business and went
Right.
back to writing was because it was too much. It was very overwhelming. It was going to be very expensive. I didn't have confidence in the economy to support the design that I wanted to do
Okay.
because I liked very 1940s inspired stuff with lots of a skirt with pants underneath, pockets and everything, all this type of thing. And I wasn't confident because I didn't like the fast fashion model. I wasn't confident the economy would necessarily support that. and I had a lot of questions about where to go and all this type of thing. So I can say I wish I'd had your book back then, because it really would have buoyed. No, it's so important. It would have buoyed my confidence to maybe keep going, keep trying, all this type of thing, and go from and go from there. And so those are all things, if you're getting into this, those are the things you have to go, look at, research, understand. Because I mean, I learned it by word of mouth. Here's how I got into fashion. I literally called this wonderful designer in Denver. Her name is Mona Lucero. She's been there for 30 years. She's had shops all over town. She is one of the very best people
Right.
as a human being and as a designer. She's a delightful person and is also a great designer. And I cold called her shop. I kid you not. I literally
Wow.
called her shop and left her a message and said, "You don't know me and I don't know you, but I'd
Right.
like to do something in fashion. If you have 5 minutes, please give
Right.
me a call back. My name is Cameron Cowan." And that
That's
and so I everything I learned about fashion, I learned word of mouth from her, from other people in the scene, all this type of thing, and that was it, because there was nothing. So
that's that's awesome. And that, yeah, that's actually like super inspirational. I think anybody who's listening, like, listen to that. Like, closed mouths do not get fed, like, in general. Like,
yes,
you really do have to
yes,
ask for opportunities. And I think that that's one thing that I've always done in my career, well, in my life, but especially in my career. I was like, I'm asking for opportunity. And I'm not going to just think that just because something is far away or seems like, too glamorous or too far away from my reality, that I can't get it. All you need to do is ask. And I've really, over the years, just tried to soak up as much information as I could from my mentors, from my employees, from my managers, and things like that. Like, what is this? When I was a associate designer, I was looking at what the senior designer was doing, like, what's she wearing to work, how does she speak in meetings, how does she carry herself, and what sort of things is she doing to enrich her life, what conferences and trade shows is she going to, things like that, and who does she hang out with, X, Y, and Z. And then I just started to mimic that. And it's like, you really do need to learn from mentors in order to grow as a person, but especially as a professional. And that can be applied to any career, but in fashion, I think it's super, super important, because, again, that gatekeeping, those people are the gatekeepers, and gatekeeping is a real thing. Like, we know it from working in the arts and publishing and news and things
yes.
like that.
No, I mean, I even when I was doing Denver Fashion Week, there was somebody who had, and and I'll be generous to him. He had a better event that was bigger, but no one liked him, and they did like me. So when I came out and did my very first series of shows, because we did 5 venues, 7 days, 35 designers, 45 models, who ironically all became best friends and are still friends to this day. And that was 11 years ago. Like, I got all the people who never would answer his phone calls. That did not make me popular in his eyes, and I don't blame him. I'm
Right.
like, no hate and judgment. If I were in his position, I would feel exactly the same way. Like, no hate and
That's
judgment whatsoever. But it
Yeah.
is it is very gatekeepy, even in a
Yeah.
relatively small scene. That was Denver at the time. It's much bigger now, of
Right.
course. But
Right.
even at that time, it's like, yeah, that's unfortunately a real thing. And I hit it off with them. He didn't. I got the creme de la creme of people that didn't really like him and would never work with him. And his event is gone, and mine still exists under differently. I sold the event, and it exists
Right.
on the leadership. And I that's not. Did I benefit from that? Yes. Would I encourage it in the future? No.
Well, I
That's
mean, I
not a
think
great way to build an industry.
no, but I think one thing maybe you could take away from that is, like, being liked is important, and being personable. Like, one thing when I was
Yeah.
younger in my career,
But making good connections, learning from people
yeah,
is a huge
network
thing.
connections
Yeah.
and learning. And
Of course.
and, like, don't burn bridges. Like, I mean, and in fashion, I think that matters the most. You want to be liked, and so you want to be. My thing is always this: I want to be talked about nicely, and I want it to be talked about in rooms with opportunity. I don't want anybody to mention my name negatively in a room saying, "Oh, well, Kadeem did this," or blah blah blah. I had this negative experience. I want all the experiences to be positive that people mention, and that always leads to other opportunity. Every time I'm good on with a book or a podcast or at a conference or a panel, then it leads to another panel, or it leads to another thing. And so that's how I've always approached it, and that's something I would definitely advise young designers, just be very cognizant of that when you're walking into rooms, about how you're perceived and what you give to the room. And then you typically you get good stuff out of it.
No, and that is so, and I didn't understand that a lot early on in my career because I started very young in politics. When I was 17, I was working at the state senate. And then I ran my first magazine when I was 21. My entire staff was older than
Wow.
me.
Right.
And so I didn't understand that. But later on, one of the reasons why I got the big designers that he never got was I went to meetings where people at that caliber were hanging out, and I kept my mouth shut. I
Ha!
listened I listened to what they wanted from a
There we
fashion
go.
event, and then I created that for them. He
Absolutely.
didn't do that. He wanted them to conform to what he wanted to do, and that wasn't going to happen. They've been in the game for too long. But when I said, "Okay, that's what you want, I'll build that for you," then it all came in. And so that's why I always say, and I even say this, and I now work in, some in kind of a more corporate environment. Listen to what people are saying around you, and
Yes.
you'll learn
Learn.
a great deal. and
Learn.
then
Yeah.
and then when you come back and you've listened and you're the one holding the solutions, that now puts you in pole positions for opportunities and all this type of thing. And that gets you invited to, the dinner, the drink thing that no one's really talking about, like that, because you're now at that playing at that level, and that will do wonders for your career.
Yeah.
It
I
took me till my mid 30s to figure that out, but it's true.
100% second that. Like
Yeah.
learning is critical. Yeah.
No, I mean it's literally, and I will say this, I spent an hour and a half on the phone with the CEO of my book publisher that has no time to spend an hour and a half on the phone with anybody, and
Of
he and I
course.
spent an hour and a half on the phone together this morning, and only about 40% of it was business.
Oh yeah.
But I also bring a lot of solutions to the table, and I solve a lot of problems. So I'm now at the level to where he will basically torpedo his schedule for the rest of the day to talk to me for an hour and a half. But that's the power of listening and responding, and that is one of those things like you're talking about with mentors and all that, and
Yeah.
being in and wanting to be in rooms opportunity where people are talking positively about you. That's great. I mean, we do a lot of leadership talk on this show, but that's great business. That's great advice for any industry, but particularly in fashion where personal connections are so important.
Yeah.
It's absolutely
Absolutely.
vital.
100%. Yeah.
Absolutely vital. Well, we've come to the part of the show where we do plugs and final thoughts.
Okay.
So, um, let us know where we can find you online and buy the book and follow you and maybe buy something from you at some point and all this type of thing. And then where we can, keep track of you. And then if you have any final thoughts, let us know and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. Well, I think final thoughts, I'll just say a quote that I like to end for like aspiring designers or students. Just like pursue your dreams fiercely and live your life authentically. I think when you do that, it opens up a whole world of opportunity. And then one other thing, always seek feedback from those in the arena, not those booing from the cheap seats. Just a couple of fun little quotes that I like to say any chance I get. But where you can find me, so my name is Kadeem Alphanso Fyffe, and you can follow me on Instagram at K_ALPHANSO. That's my middle name. And then if you just Google Kadeem Alphanso Fyffe, you can find my actual clothing brand. And then for the book, Threading the Needle, A Fashion Designer's Guide to Successfully Launching Your Collection, that is available as a ebook and in print everywhere books are sold online, so Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Bookshop, so on and so forth. And then as I mentioned at the top, the audiobook just came out, so that's available on Audible, Amazon Books, and Apple Books. And I'm super excited that the book is out there in the world, and hopefully it just continues to help other designers again pursue their dreams fiercely and hopefully launch very successful collections. And I hope that it leads to other designers getting their name out there. And then one last thing, I don't know when this is going to air, but later this in August, in the month of August, I'm doing a co-branded capsule collection with a very large global fast fashion brand. I can't say the name, but you can use your imagination. And so that will be out. So you can just look for that by Kadeem Alphanso Fyffe. And so just keep your eyes peeled. And there are a lot of great things coming down the pipeline.
Yes. If I unfortunately that is the capsule collection thing is great. I am backed up on interviews, and this isn't going to air until September.
Oh, no
But
worries.
if you
Take
can mention me on Twitter about that or
yeah,
Instagram, we'll put it out ahead of time to be like,
No
he's
problem.
going to appear on the show, and this
Okay.
will have happened by the time it airs. So please go look at these clothes. Get me on social media, and we'll promote it. No, it's good to hear people that you're doing things, all this type of thing. But get me on social media, and I will help get it out there because that will come out sooner than this will air. But no worries. No, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So, well, thank you for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast. I appreciate it. This has been so much fun.
Thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. I loved being on the podcast. Thank you so much.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter. And we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast.